Good evening and welcome everyone to the September 6, 2011 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It's my privilege to call this meeting to order. There are agendas, or should be agendas, on each side of the room, so if you'd like to pick one up and follow along with our meeting tonight, we'd welcome you to do that. There will be opportunities along the way for public comment, both on the items on our agenda as well as matters of a general nature, and we'll let you know when that time comes, and we'd love to hear from you. It is customary for us to start our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so at this point in time I'd like to ask everyone here to please rise and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, very good. And then start with the official business. If I could ask our fine village clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin? Commissioner Waldrak?
Here.
Commissioner Schnell?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much, April. Brings us to item 3, minutes of council meetings. And the first item under here is we need to approve some minutes from our August 16th, 2011 council meeting, August 16th, 2011 comprehensive plan meeting minutes, as well as our August 23rd, 2011 long-range financial planning minutes. Are there any changes or corrections to any of the minutes from anyone on the council?
Mayor Tully, Commissioner Durkin did let me know, and I passed on to the clerk a small change to the long-range financial planning minutes from August 23rd.
Okay, duly noted. With that sight unseen change from Commissioner Durkin, do I have a motion to approve as revised?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carries unanimously by voice vote. And that brings us to one other item we'd like to address at this point in time. As everyone knows, the 10th anniversary of September 11th is rapidly approaching, and we have a presentation tonight with respect to the village's plans to recognize that very somber occasion in a way that will take place in our own downtown. And tonight we have Fire Chief Jackson and Police Chief Porter to tell us a little bit more about that. Chiefs?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Chief Porter and I, it's that time of year again, when we talk about 9/11, and Chief Porter and I thought it would be appropriate to share some of our comments and thoughts regarding September 11th. One of the worst days that we've had in American soil. And that day, it changed our lives in so many ways. No event in history became known throughout the world so quickly or so dramatically. This time of year, you'll hear so many stories on the news and the different media sources talking about the attacks of September 11th. The moral of these stories is to reflect, remember, and to pay tribute. Remember what happened to this country. Remember what happened to the nearly 3,000 civilians, which included 60 police officers, 343 firefighters, whose lives were needlessly taken, and how that day changed the course of our everyday lives. We also need to remember this is also a day of unselfish acts of heroism when ordinary people performed extraordinary things in a moment's notice. Many people remember exactly where they were and what they were doing, and we each reflect on that in our own way. When you get your first glimpse of the attacks, you saw it on television, and where you were and what you were thinking that time. Chief Porter and I discussed that, and I'd like to share some of mine. I remember it clearly. It was an early morning shift change at the fire station when all the firefighters were around, they're talking about their shift, the previous shift, and the activities that were going on. I was planning to go to a rescue team meeting in Homer Fire Station. When the television news broke in with a special report, it was about a plane that crashed into the World Trade Center. My first thought, as it was by many others, was of a small aircraft that was misguided the airport and crashed into the building. My first thought was completely erased when I saw the live video of the black smoke billowing from the trade tower's upper floors consuming in flames. I couldn't believe my eyes, neither could the other firefighters. The other firefighters in the room stopped their conversations, turning to the TV with shock and horror. We were all watching in disbelief as we witnessed the iconic towers become victim to a terrorist attack, burn out of control, and then collapse. America was under attack, and the thing that we called our normal day will never be the same. Being in the fire service for nearly 30 years, I've seen changes, but none is so dramatic as 9/11 and how it impacts public safety. People rely on the police and fire departments every day. During times of emergencies, the police department respond to crimes of all types, traffic incidents, as well as basic calls for service. The fire department, we respond to medical calls, fire calls, rescue calls, and many other emergency incidents. But because of 9/11, weapons of mass destruction and terrorism response are now added to the list of services that we currently provide. From the equipment we buy to the specialized training we receive, 9/11 has changed the way that public safety does day-to-day business. So this Sunday, September 11th, please take a moment of silence to remember the courage, strength, and sacrifice made by those who lost their lives and those still living with the emptiness in their hearts. September 11th will always be a day to reflect, remember, and pay tribute, because we will never forget. Thank you.
And Mayor, members of the community may join with the village in a moment of silence on Sunday, September 11th at about 11:50 a.m., 10 minutes till noon, on Main Street in front of Rocco and Rocco's as part of the Fine Arts Fest, where we will host a moment of silence and a ceremonial ringing of the bell for 9/11. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chiefs, and thank you, Manager Fieldman. I think that's very appropriate and will provide a wonderful opportunity to reflect and remember and pay tribute to those who lost their lives in that terrible, tragic day. I don't think there's anybody over the age of 5 years old at that time that doesn't remember exactly, as if it was etched into their brain, where they were and what they were doing. We could all tell our story. I recall driving down the Eisenhower into the city and being phoned by my secretary, who was in my office at the time, which is in the Aon Center, or the old Amico building, for those of you that know it as that. And basically, they were evacuating the building. She said, "Turn around, don't come into the city. Everyone's being sent home." And then everyone, I think, sat and stood, or whatever position they happened to be in horror, and couldn't take their eyes off the horrible scenes. It is one of those situations where after, on September 12th, we all became aware of something that we weren't necessarily aware of before, and it was a pretty frightening state of awareness. But the world has changed since then, and so I think it's very appropriate that we do this. So thank you, Chiefs, and thank you for planning that. That brings us to item 4 on our agenda, public comments. This is the segment of the meeting where we will entertain comments from any members of the audience with respect to matters that are not necessarily on our agenda. So if anyone has any comments of a general nature that would like to get up and speak to those now, we would invite you to please come down to the podium, give us your name, your address, and we'd love to hear from you. Good evening, Mr. LeCren.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. My name is Tom LeCren, 545 Chicago Avenue, Downers Grove. Just a couple items that I'd like to bring up tonight. One of the things is that we've spent a lot of money, and we're going to spend some more on creating really a comprehensive plan for what this village is going to look like 20 years from now. And that's a good thing. But I would ask you to look at what are we doing now. What do we want this village to look like now, and what are we doing to get there? The big problem that I see within the village is empty housing. There's over 1,200 vacant homes in Downers Grove, according to the Chicago Tribune the other day. And the village doesn't know where they are, according to statements made by some of the people. They rely on the public to report these houses, but these things have been vacant for over 8-10 years. They've had serious notices planted on their doors from the village, so the village knows they're there. But in light of that, I'd just like to pass along 3 addresses that are close to me. Now you know they're there. Please do something if you can. But I think one of the problems is that the staff doesn't have enough tools at their disposal to police these places. So I would like for the staff to, perhaps if they can, or the council to ask them to do it, is what more do they need to be able to control these empty houses, clean them up, or get rid of them. As far as I know now, the grass can only be so high, and you got to be able to keep the house and maintain it. I haven't seen it. One house close to me was run into by a drunk driver. if you can believe that, but it happened. And that damage is still there. So it's not been touched at all. So I'd like to see if is there something that we can do about that? Maybe give them some new tools. Another area is rentals. I guess we have no control over that at all. You guys need to look at giving the staff some tools to work on that problem so that we can clean up Downers Grove and make it a healthy community as it should be today. There's a lot of rental homes out there because people can't sell their houses. Some of these are turning into drug houses. I've turned over the name to the chief. He's going to look at that house. But you see people coming down, people stopping, running in, running out. It's happening all over town. So my request is that you at least give it some consideration as to what tools do we need and what do we need to get there, zoning, code, ordinance, whatever it takes. And I have one other point to make is we've got the budget for next year coming up, those meetings. I want you to take a good hard look at our police and fire departments and what we're asking them to do. I just read an article in USA Today a couple of weeks ago, and I passed it along to the chief, is that over 400 officers have been killed by ambush over the United States. That seems to be the thing that they're doing these days, and our officers need to be well-trained and aware of that, and I hate like heck to see, a single officer responding to situations where there should be more than one, but we're only responding one because that's all we've got. So I'd ask you to consider that during the budget process for 2012, and make sure that the people at Downers Grove are safe and well protected, and that our officers, both fire and police, are well protected. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Lucran. Taking those in reverse order, obviously, we're as interested in protecting our first responders as we are in having our first responders protect our citizens, because they can't do it if they're not able to. So point well taken. And with respect to vacant properties in the community, the one thing that I don't know what's an advantage, but we're not the only town in the Chicago metropolitan area with that challenge. I read the same Chicago Tribune article, and I'm sure we are keeping our eye on the different endeavors and tools or avenues that different communities are trying to employ in order to improve their situation. Some have worked more successfully than others, but we're always keeping our eyes and ears open for other tools that we might be able to adapt here as well. But also point well taken. Any other questions or comments of the general matter at this point in time? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight, so we'll move right to the consent agenda. So I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Mayor Tully, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments from anyone on the council with respect to any items on the consent agenda? Any questions or comments on the consent agenda from anyone on the audience? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda has been passed unanimously. We have no active agenda tonight, so that brings us to item 8, first reading. This is sort of the workshop segment of our meeting where items are presented to the council for the first time for information and discussion to be voted on at a later point in time. There will be opportunities for public comment with respect to each item after the presentation from staff and questions and council from the questions and comments from the village council. And with that, looks like we're turning things over to Mr. Dabereiner.
That's correct. All 5 items on tonight's first reading come out of community development, so it is the Tom Dabereiner show tonight. There are 3 plats of consolidation that start off the first reading, so I'll turn it over to Tom.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. First item tonight is a resolution for a final plat of subdivision for 318 4th Street. This is to consolidate 2 existing lots into one, and this is the approximate location, just to get everyone oriented. We're looking for approval on the September 13th, 2011 active agenda. This is a 7,900 square foot property, zoned R4, single-family residential. It consists of 2 30-foot wide lots by 132 foot deep. The consolidation would permit the property owner to construct a two-car attached garage. And you can see that there's an existing garage there that would come down, obviously. We'll do a little close-up of the plan here. The red is the addition, so it's a pretty significant addition. There are, however, no new public improvements required as part of this, and the new lot will conform to the zoning ordinance dimensional requirements, or at least not increase a net nonconformity. The Plan Commission looked at this at their August 1st meeting. The report that you have in front of you indicates that plans had been submitted, or a review letter, excuse me, had been sent to the property owner on June 21st. We have since received, on August 29th, a revised set of plans, so those are under review currently. Just wanted to update that for you. The Plan Commission did recommend unanimous approval of the final plat of subdivision to consolidate the two lots into one. Staff concurs. Be happy to answer any questions. We do have a representative from the petitioner here as well.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the council? Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Hearing none, brings us to 8B.
This is similarly another consolidation. Resolution for a final plat of subdivision has been prepared to consolidate 3 existing lots into one lot for the property located at 339 6th Street. This is the approximate location. We're looking at for approval on the September 13th active agenda again. This property is just short of 12,000 square feet, zoned R4 as well. Consists of 3 30-foot wide by 132-foot deep lots. And the consolidation of the 3 lots into a single lot would allow the property owner to construct a future addition to the home. We do not have plans for that yet. No new public improvements would be required. The lot will conform to the zoning ordinance dimensional requirements. Similarly, the Plan Commission considered this petition on August 1st, recommended unanimous approval, found that it met all the requirements. Staff concurs. Be happy to try to answer any questions for you on this one.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the council with respect to this lot consolidation? Any questions or comments from anyone in the audience with respect to this item? Thank you. It brings us to C.
You're going to have questions on one of these, I'm sure.
Oh, just for grins and giggles, I'm going to ask one next.
The resolution for a final plat of subdivision has been prepared to consolidate 2 existing lots into one lot for the property located at 5237 Benton Avenue, and we're looking for approval on the September 13th agenda as well. This is the approximate location. It's an 11,572 square foot property, also zoned R4 single family, and consists of 155-foot wide by 131-foot deep lot, which is improved with a residence and a garage. The structure is vacant. And one 33-foot wide by 131-foot deep lot to the south. The village is the petitioner in this case, and the owner is requesting approval of the final plat of subdivision to consolidate the lots prior to selling the property. In 2010, the village purchased both lots with the intent to construct the detention facility on the southern lot to mitigate flooding issues in the area. And in fact, the detention was constructed last year. Stormwater drainage easement will be placed over the southern portion, as indicated here approximately. The easement will prevent any type of construction other than fences or a driveway, for example, into that area. The village would still be responsible for general maintenance of the detention facility. This is another case where all of the new lot will conform to the zoning ordinance dimensional requirements. We would add some easements, 5 foot along the side lot lines, 10 foot along the rear, which is to the east. Plan Commission considered this petition as well on August 1st. They were equally busy, and found that the request met the standards of the subdivision ordinance, recommended approval of the consolidation, and staff concurs. Be happy to answer any questions that I can about the planning-related aspects of this project.
Thank you, Mr. Dabrowner. Any questions or comments from any members of the council with respect to this lot consolidation? Commissioner Schnell?
Yeah, I do have a question, and it's not, the detention basin is underground, correct? So that the lot itself could have, as you said, a driveway or whatever. It's not a
Right,
dry bottom
correct,
detention
right.
facility. Okay, that's it.
Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? I'll just make a general comment with respect to the lot consolidations.
You're
and
tired
the
of
absence, yeah, in the absence of questions or comments. I think it's been said previously, we seem to be having a lot of these lot consolidations come before us, and I haven't heard anyone speak ill of any of them, because generally speaking, consolidating lots, unlike lot splits, is a good thing for lots of reasons that have previously been articulated. Is this something, I know I've raised this before, that we could perhaps look at maybe having done at the Plan Commission level and avoid the step of having them come to the council, since we seem to have so many riveting questions and they're so hotly contested?
We expect to be looking at updating our zoning ordinance and subdivision control ordinance next year, and this would be an item that would be included in part of that rewrite.
Right, because in, I think, probably 99 out of 100 cases, this is like ice cream and rainbows and things like that. If it's just good, we should not discourage, seriously, we should not discourage people from doing it because there's yet another step in the process, if this is actually something that the village would like to continue to facilitate. All right, thank you. That brings us to D, 8D.
This is an ordinance that has been prepared to vacate a 16-foot wide by 102-foot long portion of an unimproved alley right-of-way adjacent to the property at 4720 Florence Avenue, and we're looking for approval on September 13th. This is approximate location of the property, and the property owner at 4720 Florence is the petitioner and has requested that the village vacate the alley immediately adjacent to and behind west of their property. The entire 1,600 square foot alley right-of-way would be vacated to them. Per the village council policy, the petitioner would compensate the village for the vacated property. Staff estimates the fair market value of the property at $3,155.75, and the petitioner, if approved, petitioner would pay that amount. Per the village's right-of-way vacation policy, staff contacted the utility companies and outside public agencies to determine if any rights to the public right-of-way should be retained. The right-of-way, in fact, contains overhead utility lines and buried cable that would be retained. No known other utilities exist there. However, the staff is also recommending retaining a public drainage easement, utility, and utility access easement over the entire right-of-way that's being vacated. And except for a driveway, again, a fence or landscaping, future construction would be prohibited in this area. Petitioners have been informed of the requirement and do not object to that prohibition. The village's right-of-way vacation policy also permits the village to vacate the right-of-way when the adjacent property owners provide written consent, and if it's determined that the public interest would not be harmed through the vacation. In this case, there are 2 consenting property owners in favor of this particular vacation, and the public utility interests are maintained through the easement being recommended for the property. The Plan Commission considered this petition at their August 1st meeting, found that there were no public interests harmed by the vacation with the easement, and recommended approval of the vacation. Staff concurs. Be happy to answer any questions, and petitioner is here as well.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from any members of the council with respect to item 8D, the vacation request. Commissioner Schnell.
I'm getting into this now, no. The first question is, actually, it's more of a statement. There's two property owners. One is going to take the hold, the other property owner does not want anything to do with it. If
That's correct, and that's in writing.
Okay. And then the other, can you put the picture back up? And it has, I'm not against the vacation, there's not a problem. Does the vacation or does the proposed road or the alley continue north of here, and has any of that been vacated?
It does continue north. It is not yet vacated. I understand there's some consideration, but we don't have any
Okay.
applications.
No, I just didn't know if any of it had been vacated over the years, so it's fine. It's not a problem at all. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Barnett.
I'm going to kind of pick up where Commissioner Schnell left off. Using that as an example, are we, as a matter of kind of village policy, do we just wait for vacation requests from adjacent landowners, or do we, anticipate trying to unload, for lack of a better term, all these properties? I guess I wonder why we maintain them, given the likelihood that we would probably go for vacation with easements. What is the value to the village in retaining all these former alleyway considerations throughout the village? And is it a lot? Is it miles? Is it, you kind of quantify some of that? I mean, is it 100? Is it, there's 18 pieces of property? Is it 6,000 or 10,000 or what is it?
I think we have a pretty good inventory.
So why would we be almost ever not wanting to do this?
I believe this was discussed in about 2005 when the current policy had its most recent amendment, if memory serves. And the concept then was, since I have a policy that requires payment for the vacation, the village would not be proposing the vacations. We would be waiting for petitions and then working with them to meet the policy on the payment. So that's really a council policy-driven situation, and there's, of course, many ways to approach alley vacations that, depending on council direction, we could go a variety of ways, including village petitions.
How do we deal with these in terms of existing maintenance? Is it like the parkway, the homeowner, adjacent homeowners are responsible, or?
In most of the cases, these unimproved rights-of-way are not maintained by the village, and we rely on the adjacent property owners to maintain them. There are a few exceptions throughout the village.
It seems like it's generally, in most cases, it seems to me it'd be in our interest to be vacating when possible, so.
I think that's right. What we probably ought to do is dig up those materials from that discussion, because we had extensive conversations about developing the right-of-way policy. It was before your tenure. Commissioner Rankin could probably benefit from it as well. Actually, I think Commissioner Newstack could probably benefit from it, maybe even Commissioner Durkin.
Yep.
But this was sort of the, after looking at the inventory and looking at the pros and cons, and there are some situations where we wouldn't want to vacate an alley. And one of the criteria of the policy, if memory serves, is that there has to be an absolute certainty that we'll never want to use it for any purpose in terms of a public access, and that in most cases that would also be true for the other taxing bodies in town.
Sure.
And if that's confirmed, then it's just simply an issue of we have a village asset, and rather than just giving it away, we have to recoup some value for it, and we came up with sort of the best approximation. How do you value that little strip of land? You don't have too many appraisers running around specializing in that little blue strip. So this is probably the best method, and it's worked pretty well. I believe there was a question, just to Commissioner Barnett's point, once upon a time about I think it may have been Commissioner Schnell that raised it, are we sort of alerting people that there's this program that they might want to at least inquire? Because if the criteria are met, you're right, the policy pretty much says as long as you follow the policy, absent an extraordinary circumstance, it would be vacated. And I don't remember if there was ever anything other than just general information available to anybody who might be adjacent to one.
I don't recall specifically, but we can get the information that was compiled in 2003 and 2005 and get that to all the commissioners.
Thank you. Any other? Were you finished, Commissioner Barnett?
I am, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Schnell.
I'm sorry. I didn't think you were looking this way. I think one of the reasons that, in line with what Commissioner Barnett was looking at, one of the reasons that we weren't overly aggressive is the fact that we do ask for payment, which was a discussion point when we were doing this. It's very hard to insist or require people to, and in this case, obviously, that right-of-way can never be used because you can't get to it anymore. So logic would dictate that you try to get the people to the north to do this, but if they have to pay for it, there aren't going to be a lot of takers. So, unless there's a reason for it, for them. So, you know, I think this is all in the discussion. It's just, I'm not sure we ever want to open up that discussion again, because we'll be on different positions and again. Anyway, it was an interesting discussion, and I think it probably would be good for everybody to read it.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it all boils down to, do you not have people pay for it?
Yes, well, there were different schools of thought. on
Yes,
that
there
topic.
was.
Questions or comments from the rest of the council on this item? Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to item 8D as in David, the alley vacation request? All right, thank you very much. That brings us to 8E as in Edward.
A resolution has been prepared to authorize abrogation or elimination of a water main easement reserved for the property located at 6241 Main Street. Looking for approval on the September 13th active agenda. This is the location of the property, northeast corner of 63rd and Main. On April 12th, you'll recall the Village Council approved a special use for redevelopment of the property for a Chase Bank building. The property owner has submitted construction documents, and as part of these documents, the applicant is requesting that the village abrogate the existing 10-foot wide water main easement that exists both north-south and east-west through the property. The existing infrastructure in the existing rights-of-way are adequate to accommodate the need here. The village staff believes that abrogation of the easement will not adversely affect the village and that any future water main needs can be adequately served in the water mains that exist in the right-of-way. And we're recommending approval. This is based in, normally we have this information here, but it's based on Chapter 20.305 of the Municipal Code. And again, building plans were submitted in August, and those are almost completed. So I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. Petitioner is here also to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the council with respect to this item? Any questions or comments from any members of the audience? If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Weckler, stepping up to the microphone, only because folks at home can't hear you. And it doesn't work too well for the podcast either. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I should know better too, shouldn't I?
We won't hold it against you.
Ron Wackler, 919 Stratford Lane, Downers Grove, Illinois. My only concern is this is right near where I live, and if this project doesn't move along too fast, somebody has to be responsible for keeping up the property. The old pole signs from the Amoco location, they're all rusted out. It looks a little sad on that corner, so unless things are moving along pretty quickly, someone should be responsible for taking care of the property and keeping it looking decently, I should say. We would appreciate that very much. Thanks.
Well, I'm sure the petitioner just heard you say that. Well, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? Yes, sir. Take your time. I don't want you to trip over the camera stand.
Hi, Chris
Good evening.
Sarix, 1116 61st Street, Downers Grove. Just a question regarding the status of the site. Have in fact the issues regarding the removal of the prior storage tanks and so forth been resolved so that this project can move forward without any further environmental concerns regarding leaking tanks or anything like that?
Leaking underground storage tanks.
Exactly.
Right. Under
Or
the
lust, as
the
the-
lust statute, yes. Gave many law students a giggle. I don't know, but I can ask.
The petitioner is here tonight and may be able to provide an update on the project.
Good evening. Thank you for coming down.
Hi, Bill Shank with Bradford Real Estate, 10 South Wacker, Chicago, Illinois. As for the project, we're just waiting on the village to release our building permit, and then we'll be ready to go to demo all that stuff that's out there. Take the building down, take the poles down, take the landscaping down. So we're just waiting on the village to get going, plug, get our permit.
Because I didn't catch it. Who you waiting at?
And then as far as the environmental, we've been working with BP. All of the tanks have been removed, and all of the lines have been removed, and all the soil will be taken off to a environmental dump contained. I'm not sure where, but yes. Thank you. So that's where we're at.
Thank you. Well, as long as you're there, any questions from the council? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other questions or comments from the audience with respect to this item?
And that ends our first reading tonight, Mayor.
Hearing none, that ends our first reading tonight. Thank you. That brings us to item 9, which normally is a very brief segment of our meeting tonight, but we have a number of items under the mayor's report tonight. The first one is something that, as a commissioner, I was always particularly happy to be involved in, and just as happy as mayor, because this community could not possibly function as well as it does without the numerous volunteers that we have. And I emphasize volunteers who give of their time and their expertise and their dedication to serve on boards and commissions and help out in various aspects in this community. I think just about everyone up on this dais at some one point in time was on a board or commission, and so it's really a path of continued public service. So it's very, I'm very glad and privileged to actually ask for a resolution, which we're not going to read all 37 names, but we do recognize that a number of you are here in the audience tonight, and want to personally thank you for your service, either by being first-time appointees or notwithstanding the fact that you've previously served, nevertheless putting yourself forward for reappointment. And anyone listening at home that is in that same capacity and couldn't be here tonight, we want to thank. Let's do the resolution, and if anyone, any commissioners, because I know I want to thank, well, let's get the resolution passed and then I'll go to the next step. May I have a resolution to appoint and reappoint various members of the public to boards and commissions?
So moved.
Second. All right, questions or comments? And at this point, let me just first say, I'll start by thanking my colleagues for all the time and effort that they undertook to identify candidates for appointment and reappointment. The way we did it this year was the council sort of fanned out, and we all served as liaisons to different boards and commissions to make recommendations to myself as the mayor for who ought to be appointed and reappointed. It is an interesting process in and of itself, because we all obviously have to cover a lot of ground and work together. It's the best check and balance we have in town, because I get to recommend them, but nobody gets appointed unless everyone votes on it. So it was a result of a lot of effort by everyone up here, and I want to thank all my colleagues for their efforts. If any of the liaisons want to comment on any of the new appointees or reappointees, I'd give you an opportunity to do so. Understanding we have a lot to do tonight, there's 37 people in the audience. Commissioner Schnell.
I'll do it really quick. One, I want to thank Ron Wackler for saying that he would be reappointed to the Planning Commission. It's always good to have people on boards who have some experience and some knowledge of past things, and Ron's been on the Planning Commission for a while, and he's done a great job, and I want to publicly thank him for his years of service. I also want to thank Greg Jose, who is going to be the new appointee to the Planning Commission. Greg has served on the Environmental Concerns Commission and actually ran for Village Council, and has decided that he wants to continue his service to the community by applying his day job to the Planning Commission and applying that expertise. So we thank him for that. Damien Suter is here. She is going to be appointed to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Damien has been a volunteer in this community for many, many years, including the pancake breakfast for HDNA. I had to put that little thing in. She actually took over when I decided to give it up, and she's done a great job, and she also has a lot of expertise that she lent to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I want to thank all three individuals who took of their time to come tonight, and thank you for your continued service or your new service to the Village of Downers Grove.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Neustadt.
Thank you, Mayor. I was responsible for the Liquor Commission this year, and it's always a pleasure to interview the folks that are on the current sitting members that want to be reappointed, and for this case, it's Alice Straylau, Don Clary, and James Kruzanowski. They all offered me some commentary and insight to what's happening on the Liquor Commission and their desire to serve our village continues, so they'll be hopefully reappointed tonight. The new member of the Liquor Commission, if approved tonight, will be Dan Austin. I had an opportunity to speak with Dan on a number of occasions about the Liquor Commission, and he's extremely excited to serve his village. He is a father of 2 kids and lives over on the south side of town and is ready to jump in and serve. The Liquor Commission is a great place for our residents to get involved in local government. There's a review process, application hearings. It's just kind of a full-service board and commission, if you will. Not to say that the others are not, but without any of the board and commission members, we couldn't do a lot of the stuff that we do up here. We just heard, I think, 5 or 6 things from the Plan Commission. Sometimes it's community events. Other times it's environmental concerns, human services. They do a lot of the legwork for our village council and our staff. Working together as a team, we get to the point where we can actually make the hard decisions on which programs and services to go forward with. So just a big thank you to everybody who is on the list tonight and all those that are serving our village and serve us very well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin.
Well, I'd like to recognize Andrea Knutson is here. She's going to be a new member of Community Events Commission. She has worked at Easter Seals, and she is a lifelong Downers Grove resident. She's currently involved in the PTA, so thank you for agreeing to serve. And then we have Mike Davenport in the back row back there. He's going to be reappointed to the Architectural Design and Review Board, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been pleased to be liaison for the Environmental Concerns Commission again. And as such, I propose the reappointment of Mr. James Spetta and Tom Eisenhart for continuation on that board. Thank them for their service. Also, I am the liaison for transportation and parking. And we will be reappointing Mr. Dave Stubner and Mr. Chris Sarix, 2 terms, and Tony Schiller. All 3 individuals have served well on this commission, and we appreciate their service. I also thank the service for Mr. Gress and Mr. Wendt, who will be leaving that commission. And I'll point out that we have 2 new members, Pat Vilsick. I think she has experience on the library board, has been active, and I think she'll bring a different perspective to transportation and parking, so I look forward to her participation. And Mr. Roble, who's been up here a number of times on a number of issues, and he has a keen interest in transportation and parking over the years, and he attends the meetings frequently, so he might as well get him a permanent seat. So thank him for that. And that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Commissioner. And you know, Mr. Roble, that this is just a plot to keep you close so we can keep an eye on you. Very quickly on this point, 3 things. One, I too, just to pick up on Commissioner Waldeck, I want to thank those who will be ending their service on our boards and commissions. Obviously, there's many people who are interested, not everybody can serve. Some people have served for a long time, and other people have had changes in their schedules or whatnot, but our thanks to everyone who's an outgoing member of a board and commission. Certainly that's appropriate to say at this point in time. Second, just very briefly, I want to thank Keith Kalaki, Jean Marino, Richard Mathias, and Norm Sidler for their continued service on the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners and the Police Pension Board, respectively. And last but not least, I had the privilege of interviewing 4 outstanding high school students who once again are participating in our Youth in Government program. And I have to say, these young adults are really something else. The resumes that they provide me, the way they conduct themselves, the maturity, the accomplishments. I think back at what I was doing 30 years ago when I was in high school, and I said, boy, I was just lost in the woods compared to these kids. They are really quite extraordinary. So I want to thank Maura Tui, Celeste Agazzino, Tom Savota, and Joseph Vitti for their upcoming service for 1-year terms. They're all juniors at either Downers Grove North or Downers Grove South High School, and they will be serving on the Community Events Commission, the Transportation and Parking Commission, the Human Services Commission, and the Environmental Concerns Commission. So you'll be seeing them at their meetings. I think Joseph Vitti has a meeting this week, so we're putting him to work right away. But I will tell you, Mr. Roble, that when you meet Celeste, you are going to be blown away. She is quite an extraordinary young lady. I think you guys are going to all be kept on your toes during those meetings. So with that, I think we need a roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Motion approves unanimously, or the resolution is approved unanimously. Brings us to the next item under the mayor's report, which is a resolution to appoint members to the building boards of appeals. This is being done separately, but this is another board and commission appointment. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes unanimously, and also, once again, our thanks to the members of the Building Board of Appeals for their service to the community. That brings us to item 3, which is an update. As I promised, we're going to keep as a regular item on every regular council meeting a status as to where we stand regarding ComEd reliability issues. And a couple of things here to report. Number 1, the report that we received, and number 2, the town hall meeting that's coming up. With the first item, we have received, and it was posted, I believe, I shouldn't say we received, we created.
Yes.
And I believe it's already been posted to the village website last week, a reliability report, which is one of the action items that we specifically said we were going to do in the wake of the issues that were brought to our attention following some extraordinary weather that caused some extraordinary outages. Our focus, of course, again, is not so much on the fallout from the storms, but the issues that the storms brought to the service, which were more of a chronic nature. And I won't get into the report because that's the purpose of the town hall meeting, but that report, for anyone who's interested, is available. And we have shared it with representatives of ComEd. I actually met with 3 representatives of ComEd the day the report came out. My understanding is that they will be attending, some senior representatives in external affairs will be attending our town hall meeting on September 15th at 7 o'clock at the Belmont Recreation Center. And I believe we'll be in their multi-use space on the lower level because we thought we might not have enough room in Village Hall here, so we wanted to move it to a larger venue. There will be a presentation in terms of what we have been able to determine from our own efforts and from information received from Commonwealth Edison. We have identified particular areas that we think can and should be addressed by Commonwealth Edison. We expect to have some input and commitments, we hope, from them between now and then, but they've only recently gotten the report. And then we can speak to those at the town hall meeting, and then of course will be an opportunity for public comment. I know that we will have other elected officials at the town hall meeting as well, including some of our state senators and state representatives, although the exact attendance list hasn't been finalized yet. We understand they all have busy schedules, but we would like this to be a meaningful exercise in identifying issues, coming up with proposed solutions, and then an action plan for implementation and some accountability down the road to make sure that what is committed to is actually done. I would like to keep it focused on that as opposed to generalized grouses, because I think if that were the case, we would probably be there for several weeks. We're really trying to focus on actually getting some improvements to reliability in our community. I think that's our first and foremost goal. So that is the update with respect to ComEd. Manager Phelan, did I miss anything?
No, sir, you covered it. Please join us on September 15th and check out the report online. It's in the village's homepage in the top center.
Okay. And we will be coming up to, one second here. I'll cover this. DuPage County Stormwater Committee, cover that now or cover that during
Either
report?
way,
That doesn't matter? All right, well, I'll cover it now, but let me just, as long as we're on the topic of ComEd. Now, one of the other things that we have on our agenda tonight is a resolution with respect to ComEd. And obviously, we are working very closely, or trying to work as closely as we can with senior representatives of ComEd, not only to have these issues identified and to come up with some action items, but also to participate in our town hall meeting. That said, there is some legislation that is currently on the governor's desk. I believe that's still the status with respect to what you probably heard as the smart grid technology. And while we certainly want to continue our productive relationship with ComEd in terms of the issues we're trying to accomplish, we have taken, or there's a resolution that's before us tonight to be voted on with respect to a position on the smart grid technology. and I can let my colleagues speak to it if they wish as well. But essentially, the issue is, it's not that we so much have an objection to the smart grid technology as it is the performance measures that are included in the legislation. From the municipal perspective, they don't go far enough, and we are not the only municipalities that express this position. And I understand, in speaking with representatives of ComEd, that the performance measures are themselves a product of negotiation. And I understand that negotiation usually leads to a compromise, and a compromise is something that keeps all parties equally unhappy. But from the municipal perspective, the current bill, which is Senate Bill 1652, doesn't go far enough. I don't know if anyone wants to add to it, but we have a resolution before us which we can vote on now, as long as I've described it. But having said that, we obviously want to continue to work with ComEd and actually get some things done here in Downers Grove. Any questions or comments with respect to, well, let's take the motion first, and then we'll go from there.
Mayor Tully, I move that we approve a resolution opposing the ComEd smart grid legislation as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Barnett.
Thank you, Mayor. You recapped that perfectly well. It's the smart grid technology, I think, will be a benefit to all of us, at least my understanding of it. One of the challenges for this body is to find the proper balance between working with partners and trying to enhance partner relationships, as well as maintaining a strong advocacy position for our residents. One of the challenges, in my view, of this bill, Senate Bill 1652, has to do with some of the definitions that are used in terms of what makes an outage and some of the measurements and the metrics that are going to be used to determine what the reliability rates are. Those, in my humble opinion, would not translate well enough to some of our residents by their definition of an outage and what their expectations on reliability are. I think there's a lot of really good technology in the bill. There's also a lot of really good related elements having to do with clean technology relative to coal, having to do with renewable energy sources. A lot of really good targets that are out there. I think it is a decent beginning point for compromise, but in particular as it relates to Downers Grove and our residents, I think there needs to be more specifics that translate into the average resident's opinion of what makes an outage, how long it ought to last, and what the expectations for improvement over the next 10 to 15 years are.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other? Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. Along with Downers Grove, many of our surrounding neighbors are also providing and approving very similar resolutions to this, to their state legislators. I know Westmont and I believe Elmhurst are also providing resolutions like this one. We heard from a lot of our residents this year after two major storms in Downers Grove, and while we did our part to try and clean up and fix up what we could as a village, ComEd was the topic of many conversations over the summer. So this, along with our town hall meeting and our fine work by our mayor, meeting with ComEd representatives on behalf of the village, goes to all the concerns and questions raised by our residents. So we're working very hard to get ComEd to come and tell us what they're going to do to improve the situation. This is just one step of that, and I will be in full support of it.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Just to reiterate, I think as Commissioner Barnett pointed out, that in the right format, this legislation could be and will probably be very beneficial to a number of communities, including Downers Grove, but it's the current state of affairs. And I think you capped it right by saying it's a good starting point.
It is.
A lot of good legislation starts off in one form and often is improved before it finally becomes a law. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin? Aye. Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes unanimously. Last item I have then under the mayor's report is wanted to report on the meeting this morning of the DuPage County Stormwater Committee. The most significant event of that meeting is that the next draft of the DuPage County countywide stormwater and floodplain ordinance revision draft is being issued very shortly. In fact, actually, it's out now. The committee today voted to commence the 45-day comment period on that ordinance, so we will be addressing it internally here at the village through our own, speaking of boards and commissions, our Stormwater Floodplain Oversight Commission, in addition to staff review, will be looking at the ordinance and providing comment. There was a request to extend the comment period out to 60 days as opposed to 45, but I sensed that there was a desire to get keep the process moving because there have been a number of extensions over the course of time, and there are a lot of good elements in this ordinance, which I think would actually behoove us to move forward, understanding, of course, that stormwater is a very important issue that both the public and municipal representatives alike need to have an opportunity to weigh in on. Anything further on that topic, Mr.
Our own
Kuhlman?
Stormwater Committee will review the proposed revisions at their September meeting coming up later this month, and then their comments will be provided along with staff comments for Village Council review in early and mid-October, and we will be able to provide our Village of Downers Grove comments back to the County Stormwater Committee within the 45-day timeframe. Thank you.
Thank you. The current draft of the ordinance in a redlined fashion, so you can see all the changes, which I know Commissioner Waldeck appreciates, is available on the county's website. Perhaps we can provide a link for our residents, because I'd read the site, but it's about 3 lines long, and I don't think you want me to tell you a URL address that long.
We will provide a link, Mayor, yes.
In case anyone is interested. But I think there's some good aspects to this that, when all is said and done, is going to allow for improved stormwater governance in DuPage County. Those are all the items I had under the mayor's report. That brings us to item 10, the manager's report.
No report tonight, Mayor.
It's making up for mine. Attorney's report.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Just a quick presentation, one item tonight. It's an ordinance vacating a certain portion of a right-of-way located adjacent to 4720 Florence Avenue, which will be on next week's active agenda.
Thank you. It brings us to item 12, council member reports and new business. Start with Commissioner Barnett.
Would you like me to introduce this next subject? Or do you want to wait till the very end?
That's a good question.
Manager, do you have a preference?
Perhaps we could go forward with the presentation by the resident tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that first.
Okay.
We have
Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you for reminding me. We'll do the council member reports and new business second. We have an item we're going to have first, which is on the topic of electricity aggregation. And Commissioner Barnett, if you wanted to introduce it further, be my guest.
Municipal aggregation is I'll probably get corrected by the experts shortly, but it's a relatively new to the state of Illinois opportunity for municipalities to essentially cooperatively and as a municipality as a whole purchase electricity. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen the various ads from electric suppliers over the last probably 2 years is when they've really started ramping up. There are many of them out there. And this is, you can purchase electricity now as the actual electricity itself from a variety of folks. Distribution is still by Commonwealth Edison. Some of the companies that provide this service specialize in things like renewable energy. Others are purely cost-driven. But the concept of municipal aggregation allows the municipality to cooperatively purchase electricity, ideally at a rate that would result in a savings to both the municipality and its residents. So with that, we have a presentation tonight from a resident who's in this business and would like to bring us up to speed a little bit.
So thank you for introducing that, Commissioner. And we do appreciate the opportunity to hear more about this topic in a generic sense, because I understand that there's a few players out in this market. So the idea is for us to get some better information about what exactly this is, what some of the benefits might be, and then at some point in time we might or might not consider pursuing it in the normal fashion that we would whenever we do anything. Of course, it's always done by an RFP process. But in terms of getting ourselves better educated, we appreciate you coming down, so welcome, and please, I invite you to introduce yourself, and you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Tully and Commissioner Barnett. Thank you for the introduction as well. My name is Richard Spilkey. I am a resident of Downers Grove. I'm here partly as a resident, but also as an employee of my company. My colleague, Dean Nickel, who's beside me here, he and I have made about a dozen or so of these presentations, give or take, to a number of communities in the Chicagoland area in a similar fashion. So indeed our company is one of the ones that's pursuing this type of business, as you indicated. And so I did put together about a dozen slides here that I gave a hard copy and also an electronic copy that we can cover. It shouldn't take more than 15 minutes to cover this information, I don't think. But I do believe it's significant. I think it's interesting, and I think it is an important thing to do. Whether or not the city chooses to go forward with my company or any other, I do think it is in the best interest of our town, our village, to pursue it. So there's a few points I'll make here. You can see them on your slides yourself. I'm on slide 2. There's been a few market and regulatory changes that have occurred, which I'll touch on, which have created this opportunity. There's been a pretty positive and affirmative response. This was even on the front page of the Chicago Tribune as recently as last week about this phenomenon happening throughout the state of Illinois. Really, it's not just happening in ComEd, it's throughout the state. I will estimate some back of the envelope calculations, I call them, about how much money we're talking about here, of how much savings the village citizens might receive as a consequence of going forward. Then I will put forward a few recommendations that I have to consider to go forward with the idea, and then we'll just have Q&A if there is any. Slide number 3. This bar chart is showing, as Mayor Tully indicated, the competition is fierce for your electric business these days. This bar chart is showing since 1999, the yellow bars indicate how many businesses were certified and licensed to sell electricity in Illinois to business customers, not homes, business customers. And you can see this year right now there's 37 companies certified going after the business community. About 13 of those, the red bar on the far right, about 13 of those, or exactly 13 of those, are certified to sell to residential customers. And the reason that bar went up so high in 2011 is because of the legislation that we're going to talk about, and also because of the new tariffs that both ComEd and the utility in Southern Illinois, Ameren, introduced, which enabled this to reach out to residential customers in a more cost-effective way, which I'll explain. The other interesting bullet point that a lot of people are unaware of, if you look at the third bullet point down on this slide, right now as we speak, 80% of the energy, the vast majority of the energy that's flowing to the business community, so not the homes, is not coming from ComEd. 80% of that energy is coming from one of these 37 companies that's competing fiercely for the business community's electricity business, and that's where it's coming from, and a lot of people are surprised to hear that. In fact, most of the businesses in Downers Grove have also chosen an alternative supplier, and in the school district, among them. The next slide is one of the reasons why we're here today. About 6 or 8 months ago, this Public Act 96-0176 that you see listed there, and I forwarded a copy of this to the village manager recently. This is the law that allowed communities, and that's what we're here to talk about, it allows city councils to put forward a referendum and ask the citizens if they want to negotiate on their behalf for a better rate in an opt-out, what's called an opt-out aggregation program. So as the second bullet indicates, essentially the aggregation allows communities to combine the residents into one buying group, and it results in a much better price, and I'll talk about some figures in a few minutes about what that means. But it gives the citizen, or it gives the city council the right if the referendum is passed. The other portion of it, I mentioned opt-out. Each citizen will have the opportunity to opt out if they don't want to be part of it, if they've already signed up with another company on their own, or they don't want to be part of it for whatever reason they may have. No one is forced to be part of the aggregation. They can all choose to opt out for any reason they have. Slide 5. This is a slide that shows that already 20 towns have passed referendums just like this. Last April, 20 towns passed this referendum. 2 towns had it on the ballot and did not pass it for various reasons, but the vast majority of them, 20 out of 22, did. So these towns are listed above, and many of these towns, as we speak, in fact, about half of them already have chosen an alternative supplier for their residents, and the other half are in the process of doing so. So obviously there's an appetite for this that's been growing. The other interesting thing about this slide is these folks, or these towns, passed these referendums back in April, when a lot of the questions were still, the answers to the questions were unknown of exactly how this worked and what's the process and what are the rules, and a lot of that was unknown at the time. We know a heck of a lot more now about how it works than we did back then. So these towns were, I would say, proactive and quite a bit ahead of it. The point is there's an appetite for this that appears to be growing. Slide 7 is probably an important slide. Here we're talking about, or pardon me, we're on slide 6. Slide 6 is talking about the savings and some estimates for savings. Right now, each one of you could go home tonight, hop on the internet, click on our company's website or one of the other 13 companies' websites, and choose a different supplier if you know your ComEd account number. It only takes 5 minutes. And you would receive, 10% savings, 12% savings, depending upon whatever the offer may be. So everyone in Downers Grove could do that tonight if they were so inclined. But this concept of aggregation of the buying group drives the savings even more. And so if you look at the bottom bullet point here, and again, I'm being conservative because I don't want to overstate something, but based on today's forward curve, we think we can get at least another 5% savings on top of our 13% savings that we're showing on the internet today, and this is common not just for our company, but for all the other companies that are offering the service. Now slide 7. Slide 7 is one I'd like to draw your attention to. I've done a back of an envelope calculation. So I'm not, standing here saying that absolutely to the penny this is the way it would be, but I tried to be conservative, and I've assumed an 85% participation rate, which is about the average that we've seen in the communities that we've worked with in the past. And based on the average home and the average usage and the average participation rate of 85, I've estimated that if everyone tonight got on the internet in Downers Grove and switched to just our ordinary posted price at our company, they would save about $1.8 million a year. However, through aggregation, based on the prices we're starting to see that are being offered to communities that aggregate, you can see the savings on the third bullet point goes up dramatically, more than double, to $3.8 million. So we're talking about a pretty significant amount of money of annual savings that the residents of Downers Grove would enjoy, based on some rough numbers here. Slide 8 is communicating the fact that the bill you receive is still coming from ComEd. This is one of the agreements that we reached with ComEd and also with Ameren, which is the utility in central and southern Illinois, whereby they will continue to offer the billing service on our behalf. With our business customers, we bill ourselves. But we have approximately 20,000 business customers. We don't have millions of business customers, and ComEd has a system that's much more able to bill the millions of customers than ours. So this is one of the cost savings. This is one of the reasons why that red bar jumped up and all of a sudden there's 13 companies that are now able to do the residential market, is because of this billing service that ComEd is offering. ComEd is also offering, and we pay them for this, there's a fee, it's not free. I believe it's approximately 1.7% that we pay them, just so you know what the number is. They're also offering what's called the purchase of receivables. We call that the POR. So in other words, folks who are unable to pay their bill or who don't pay their bill, if that happens today, ComEd has the ability to shut people off, and there's rules around that, and those rules stay in place. So those rules don't change. And so if the customer is with us as a supplier, ComEd can still enforce the shut-off rule because it's still a bill coming from ComEd. And so that's another reason why all these marketers like our company and the others have jumped into the business, is because this allows us to not have to check the credit of every single homeowner when they want to become a customer, because the credit is taken care of through this POR program. Slide number 9 is an example. This is a real bill from a real person, and this is from the month, just a recent month. This is from June 6th to July 6th, you can see. And so the top part of the bill is what we're talking about here. The top part of this person's bill is what we call the supply charges. And you can see that there's 3 parts to the supply charges when they're with ComEd. There's the energy charge itself, which you can see is 7.1 cents. There's the transmission charge, which is about 0.7 cents. And then there's this thing called the purchased electricity adjustment, which a rate is not shown, but you can see on this person's bill for that month it was $7. And so what's happening here is when you're with ComEd, and most of the residents still are with ComEd, these are the prices that they're paying. And these rates are set by the Illinois Power Authority. The Illinois Power Authority is a state government agency that's tasked with purchasing the power on behalf of the utilities, ComEd and Ameren, in the state of Illinois. And then these rates are established, which are pretty close to what the costs are, but ComEd doesn't make any profit or loss on the energy supply part of the bill. And that's why you have that $7 adder in this particular case, in this particular example, because those rates didn't quite capture all the costs that ComEd incurred in delivering power that month. And so this person had to pay an extra $7 this month for that, what we'll call the purchased electricity adjustment, so that ComEd would break even on the deal. That could also be a negative number, but in most cases it's been a positive number based on the history that I've seen. But if you just add up the 2 fixed rates, which I've done there in orange, you can see it's about 7.92 cents for that bill. Okay, so now this person switched providers, and now this person paid $134. And if you divide by the amount of kilowatt hours they used a lot more kilowatt hours this month than the previous month because it was a hot a hot August and July and so forth, but they paid 6.45 cents, and this is just, through a standard switch, and so they saved $41, which I've calculated down there at the bottom. Now, the middle part of the bill is the delivery services. That's what ComEd charges to deliver the power, regardless of if they're with an alternative supplier or with the ComEd supply source. And the bottom part, of course, is the taxes. And so those two sections, the delivery services and the taxes section, neither of those change. The only thing that changes is the top, and the top portion is what we're talking about, and that's where the savings is derived. Now, the other interesting thing is the top portion of the bill is about 2/3 of the dollars that are in each bill. So it's the majority of the dollars in that top part, and that's where the savings come from. So for this particular month, this individual saved $41. This is another important point I want to make, this slide. Let's see, this is number 11. And again, I don't want to be too technical, but this will be an ingredient and one of the reasons why I have a recommendation for the council when I conclude in a few moments. This is simply a chart that shows the forward curve of power on any given day. So for example, if someone wanted to buy, we'll look at the red line. The red line is 2013. If someone wanted to buy power in 2013, and they wanted to buy a whole year's worth, and this is the market that the competitive market operates in. And if they would have done it on the far left-hand part of the chart in the beginning of 09, if we wanted to buy power for 2013, but we wanted to do it in the beginning of 09, we would have paid around $50 a megawatt hour, which is about 5 cents. If you look at the graph, you can see the economy went down, which we all know, in about the first quarter of 09, and it dropped. The market bumps up and down. The point is, the market moves just like the stock exchange moves, and it moves up and down from time to time. When entities go out for an RFP, and they think they're getting the best deal because they're going out with an RFP, what's happening is my company and all the rest of the companies that are competing to win the business will look at the forward curve. We'll say, okay, the cost of power today is $40. We want to add, say, a $2 margin ourselves to make a profit. Maybe our competitor will add 2 1/4. Maybe a more aggressive competitor will add $1.75, and they'll be a quarter less than us. And then they'll win the bid on that day because they took the thinnest margin. And that's, how the competitive process works, and that's okay. But the maximum value comes not so much by squeezing a quarter out of the supplier or 50 cents out of the supplier. The maximum value comes by locking in when we can get the maximum savings and the maximum value for the residential community. And that may or may not happen on the given day that the RFP is due. We're just getting a snapshot of the market on that day that the RFP is due. And again, I think that we're maybe saving quarters and dimes, but we're not saving the dollars that we could save by locking in at the right time. Slide 12, I'm almost finished. I understand that the wheels of government sometimes move slowly, is what I'm told. Nevertheless, in order to realize these savings and capture this value that currently exists, I am suggesting that we do need to move forward. The timeline is indicating that if we're going to put this on the referendum for the March election, that the deadline for that is January 3rd. The next opportunity would be the general election, which is November 6th, and the deadline for submitting that to get it on the referendum, or to get the referendum submitted at the county level, is August 20th, according to our research. So I'm here to advocate for the first date, if possible, and obviously that's a city council decision to make and to consider. The final slide I have here is just a recommendation, and that is, again, the savings are available today. The forward curve is enabling us to procure the power and get savings the way I've showed on slide 7. And so our recommendation is that the city find a partner that offers the aggregation services and the supply both to provide the maximum value. So perhaps an RFQ could come out and solicit suppliers. Naturally, our company would be interested, and there probably would be a few more that have the wherewithal to handle this type of a project, to stand with the city council, or the city council would be confident giving their recommendation behind that company with all the services that go along with communicating with the citizens, educating them, putting out the information so that citizens understand what an opt-out program is, how it works, and all the RFP support that goes along with that. So that is our recommendation. We think that gets the maximum value for the citizens and still allows the city to solicit bids from different companies. So with that, I'll conclude. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them if I can, or my colleague Dean would be glad to do it too.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. Certainly appreciate the informative presentation with respect to the opportunity and whether it's something that, like other communities, we should take advantage of potentially. I had a number of questions because I haven't looked into this before, although it's interesting, in the last 6 months I've heard from a lot of those 13. So you're clearly identifying a hot topic these days, and did see the Trib article. Just for the clarification of not only myself, but also anyone in the audience listening at home, this whole discussion is focused on price, not reliability. Is that correct?
Right. It's interesting that you had the topic of ComEd and the reliability and what have you. I want to make it very clear that ComEd is still in charge of the reliability and reading the meters and fixing the poles, and if a tree knocks a line down, the ComEd truck is still the folks responsible. I also want to make it clear, because this has been misunderstood, this does not harm ComEd financially in any way. If someone chooses Integris or another one of the competitors and not ComEd any longer, ComEd is not harmed financially. They break even on that top part of the bill, like I showed you, regardless of what supplier is picked. They make their profit on the delivery services, which is that middle part of the bill, and that will continue to be the delivery service part of the bill even after a switch is made to another provider. So we're not helping ComEd, nor are we hurting ComEd. Those are two different topics, and I don't want to make it seem like there's anything else going on there.
I understood. That's why I asked the question, because I understood this to be completely different than reliability, and this has nothing to do with the transformers and the lines and the poles, substations, none of that stuff. This all just has to do with...
Right, that's all part of what we call the delivery services.
Right, so all this has to do with the price that you pay. Let's see if I understand this. Basically, the concept is, and I haven't read the legislation, but I will, that the law allows a municipality to, via referendum, basically create a bargaining unit on behalf of all residents. And if people don't want to be in that, well, first of all, they don't have to pass the referendum, but then they also have an ability to opt out even if the referendum passes?
That is correct. The citizens have two chances to say no. They can vote no on the referendum if they're uncomfortable with the idea, or even if the referendum passes. Part of the law requires that a communication be sent to all the eligible participants. That's one of the services that our company is part of, producing, is this letter with the proper language, the communication, and the citizens can say, no, I don't want to be part of it, if they don't wish to be.
Okay. So it's not imposing anything upon anyone. If they want out, they can stay out. Number two, let's assuming the referendum passes and the opt-out notices have been returned and you get the 85% participation as reflected in your example, is there an ongoing obligation by the municipality to continue to serve as the bargaining agent for the 85% in perpetuity, or is there an ability to say, this isn't working out, we're gonna stop?
That's a great question.
Or do you need to undo with another referendum?
We've had that question asked of us before, so we're fairly well prepared for that one, I hope. Let's say we sign a one-year deal, or you sign a one-year deal with one of our competitors. That deal ends at the end of the term, the one-year deal, and then when it ends, if you want to choose another provider, or if the citizens want to go back to ComEd, that's what happens. So no, you're not perpetually stuck with that provider if they've done a poor job, or if you want to switch to a better company that you found to be more appealing, or if you wish to just go back to the utility at the end of it. But the first agreement, be it 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, depending upon what the city council chooses, that will have to be followed through on, unless there's a default or someone breaks the contract, which hopefully wouldn't happen. But so it does end. The contract does end, and it can be renewed or not.
Okay, thank you. The other question I have in that regard is, essentially one of the other services that a company like yours provides is, rather than our staff now having to do all the negotiating, or I guess who we'll be negotiating with, there's other services. You said you avoid the consultants. So basically there's other services that are provided other than just we get a lower rate. There's additional services that are being provided by the alternative source.
Right. Now, for example, first of all, there's the consulting fee itself. We've seen most consulting fees in the range of 50 cents a megawatt hour. In Downers Grove case, that would add up to several $100,000 per year, which is less savings that the citizens would realize, because that would be embedded into the price.
If we were to do it ourselves.
Or if a consultant were to be hired to then just go out for an RFP, for companies like ours to just bid on the price, as I indicated as an example. There's that simple math. There is the services of, the mailers, the communication, the advertisements in the paper or billboards or radio or whatever the city council chooses to advertise, and the costs incurred with that. If the city wants us to do, or wants the company that they choose to do things like that, those are costs that either could be incurred by the city themselves or could be asked to be supported by the company that they've chosen. There's the education, like if we were to have an open house or an open hearing at the library or at the rec center or here, and we would have a number of them to educate the community, to ask questions, show them examples of the bill like we did tonight. There's that type of educational activity that could be provided if that's what the city council wants. You also, I thought I heard you mention green power during your remarks about the ComEd smart grid. That's another avenue that a lot of these towns are asking for. They want a higher percentage of green. There's different definitions of green. Green is a generic term that I'm using tonight, but if the city council wanted a higher percentage of green through biomass or through wind or through what have you, that's the type of thing that a supplier can arrange. Now, of course, that makes the cost go up a little bit, but that is the type of option that the city council could craft based on their own preferences.
One last question, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues. I'm assuming that you need to enter into a relationship with an alternative provider like your company first, and then go through the steps of achieving the referendum, and then finding out, going through the opt-out process. So there's some upfront cost. Where I'm going with this is that presumably you could enter into this agreement, and the referendum fails. I mean, the two towns that had the referendum fail, I presume they had to hire somebody to help them get to that point, and do the education, do the radio, the billboards and everything, and then it failed, and so there was some out-of-pocket upfront cost in that instance. I imagine there would also be a situation, however unlikely, that the referendum passes, but then the opt-out percentage is just grossly disproportionate to what prior experience has been. We have a electorate, for example, that says, sure, we can pass the referendum as long as they get the choice to opt out, and then everybody opts out. There again, there would be that upfront cost that you wouldn't reap the benefit of. Is that, am I way off base with that?
Both of those things are possible. I will say that in all the towns that we have been involved in, where we did actively educate the community and answer their questions, we've never had a referendum not even come close to not passing when we've gotten involved in educating the community. So I guess that's a chance that our business accepts. And we also would accept the risk, at least I'll speak for my company, we would accept the risk if there was a high opt-out percentage for whatever reason, that we consider that part of the risk of doing business. The other interesting thing is, you noticed on that bill I showed you, slide number 11 I think it was, there was only one line item on the bill. There was no extra little adder like there was on the ComEd bill that I pointed out to you on slide number 10. There's one line. We take the risk of what the costs are and the scheduling and what the market's doing. And as I showed you on slide 10 with the ComEd example, they do have that little bucket of cost called the purchased electricity adjustment, which is avoided. And it's not a small amount. I mean, it's $7 on this person's bill. And, and that's a lot when you add it up over a year and over, all the bills that are in our village. So, but when you're with another supplier, not just our company, but with any of the suppliers, we have one line item and we assure that rate. That's been guaranteed in the contract for that term.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it very much. Questions or comments from the council on the presentation? Commissioner Schnell?
Just one question. If the community was to opt into something like this, you have school districts, you have the village, you have sanitary districts, you have other government entities involved in this. Would they have the ability to opt out?
Okay, that's a great question, Commissioner Schnell. This is for primarily residential customers.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with
government. But
government?
also, again, it's up to the city council to choose. Most of the other towns are also putting what we call their small commercial customers into the mix as well. And there's a definition of what small commercial means. And so just in your mind, just to visualize, like Angelo's Pizza would be a small commercial customer perhaps. But anything much bigger than that would be, they would strike their own deal and they would deal with one of our salespeople or one of our competitor companies to negotiate their own supply arrangement. Like all the schools already are with another supplier. Okay. I'm sure most of the businesses in town of size have probably already switched. I'm sure the Jewel and Dominic's have switched a long time ago. And the hospital, I'm sure, has switched and what have you. So we're talking about here the residential and what we'll call small commercial. And again, if you chose not to have the small commercial in it, that would be the city council's choice. But all the towns we're working with so far have decided to put the small commercial in with the residential group.
So we're just talking the number of residents we have plus perhaps some other small.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Well, actually, to pick up on the other part of your question, which is this an opportunity for multiple taxing districts to get together and create an even larger bargaining unit? Like, for example, could you, assuming the schools weren't already in it, I'm just making this up, you could add other public entities.
Well, what is happening is, and my colleague Dean could comment on this as well, if not better, he is working for county level intergovernmental agreements. And so we have talked to like Will County, and we may talk to DuPage County, so it is possible that towns can get together within a county.
Interesting.
And make it even bigger. And that would perhaps improve the price a little bit. But one of the things that Dean and I mean, certainly we are interested in that because that's more business and larger amount of accounts, but, you know, Downers Grove is certainly big enough on its own to command a lot of attention, and adding another town to it wouldn't really make that much of a difference, in my opinion.
Okay.
Nevertheless, if there was a countywide group going on, that wouldn't be a bad avenue to pursue.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine, thanks.
Commissioner Barnett?
I had two questions. You kind of alluded to it before. Is a typical contract 1 to 3 years?
Most of the ones we're seeing are 1 to 3 years, yes.
Okay. What happens to the, it's unlikely it's a lot, but the existing residential suppliers who may have already contracted with an alternative energy supplier, what happens to those situations? If they go through the referendum process, don't deal with the opt-out, how's that?
Right, that's a great question. I myself have already switched. And so, let's say Downers Grove went forward with this, I'm a resident in Downers Grove, I've already switched. So the way we've, you know, there's this whole data exchange with ComEd of thousands and thousands of pieces of data and keeping the privacy of the citizens in mind as we go. And I don't want to bore you to death, but this is one of what we call the pre-aggregation services that we talk about. But to answer your specific question, my account will not even show up on the list to get the opt-out mailer because I'm already out, because I'm with somebody else. I've already made a switch. So ComEd will not even send that account number over. But for all the citizens who haven't switched yet, those are the account numbers that we get back, and those are the people who we send the mailer to decide if they want to opt out or not. And then there's people who are moving in and moving out, and you know, there's all those issues to deal with as well.
So in Illinois, ComEd and Ameren are essentially all the T&D, right? I mean, there's some municipal-owned equipment, but it's a very small amount. It's basically ComEd and Ameren.
Both ComEd and Ameren both divested of all their generation assets in the early 2000s.
So what really is going on is it's a brokerage in the market of electricity, kilowatts.
Well, there's dozens of what we call wholesale suppliers.
Okay.
So when I showed that forward curve graph of 2012 and 2013, that's what we call the forward curve, and that's what the wholesale suppliers offer. So companies like ours and the other 37 that compete with us, we buy wholesale blocks of power. You might think of us as Walmart. We buy train loads of bicycles. And if you want to buy a bicycle, you don't go to the Schwinn factory, you go to the Walmart and you buy a bicycle, and they bought a whole train load of bicycles of different kinds and styles, and you choose the one you want. And so I guess if you'll allow me to make that analogy, we're kind of the Walmart or the bulk, or we're the middleman, if you will. We don't manufacture the bicycle, but we buy a bulk of them on behalf of our customers. And there is more to it than that. I don't mean to oversimplify it. We have to schedule and forecast our customers' power with the grid every day. We are responsible for the load that we serve, and we got to make sure we have adequate capacity resources in place to meet their needs, and there's rules about all that.
That's kind of where I was headed. Is there ever a situation where any one of the alternative energy suppliers finds themselves on a given day short? How does that get handled in terms of the actual user?
Yes, that can happen, and we are financially obligated. Our customers will never see that. I mean, there is no PEA for us. We are responsible, and if we miss schedule or we miss forecast or we don't hedge our positions, and that's why, again, I showed that forward curve graph, because if we lock in a price, we're a risk-averse company, like many companies are. We're going to lock in our price right now. We're going to hedge it, so to speak. We don't want to take any risk on the market going up or down, and so we're going to lock it in right now. But if we do make a mistake and we don't buy enough or we buy too much, that's our business risk that we take, and our customers will not bear any additional cost one way or the other.
That's all I've got, Mayor.
And most suppliers feel that way too. We're not unique in that. That is the obligation that we all put ourselves through.
Any other questions or comments, Commissioner Rankin?
So you were explaining how you've already opted out. So people like you wouldn't be automatically opted in, but you're saying that you would get a better rate if you were part of this big picture, right?
Right, the rate that I would get the rate that I'm showing on slide 11, if we could go one more slide forward, please. This person's rate is 6.45? 6.45. Now, that's not bad, and you could get that tonight if you went to the link on the
Right.
internet, and you could choose that tonight yourself. But the rates we're seeing for aggregation are less than 6.
So does
So
your
far.
company reach out to folks that are like you that have already chosen to do this, even though if the village then decides to aggregate? You understand what I'm trying to ask?
Yes, what will happen is my contract will expire with the company that I've chosen, and then at the end of that, I might want to go with what the village chose for me.
Okay.
But we don't want anyone breaking their contracts that they have with
Sure.
somebody else. That would not be right, and we don't advocate that. So that's why they're not part of the initial opt-out solicitation.
Sure.
Because we want them to stay with.
That is a common service that is provided, that you have a list, and you go back through, additional mailers or calling, we have the right, turn on and call those.
Okay.
Rich, can I just make one point real quick?
Please.
Rich has mentioned a couple times our experience in aggregation. That's, the bulk of that has come from Ohio. Ohio is at least a decade ahead of us in offering aggregation to residents. So when he talks about our experience, we've been doing it for about 12 years in Ohio. That's where that comes from. That's where the statistics on 85%, staying with the program, and the like come from. Just wanted to make that clear. But so in that town, as I, answer your question, it comes from that perspective. We've had programs that follow on after the referendum is passed and the initial batch of customers sign up. It's up to each town, and how they want to work with the provider, but it's a possibility. And I have one more question, or a little more detail behind one of the mayor's questions. You mentioned the two towns that did not pass referendum, assumption being they work with somebody and there was a sunk cost there. We're actually working with one of the two right now, and they're telling us that they believe it did not pass because they didn't partner with anybody. So it was kind of done in short notice. The bill was drafted, they put it on the ballot. They didn't do anything in the way of education. They feel it's important now, and so they're looking at alternatives to partner with somebody to do community outreach, town hall meetings, and other things that Rich mentioned. So just wanted to add that as well.
Thanks for the clarification.
Sure.
Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. I see Oak Brook and Oak Park's kind of close, Wooddale. Are there any other DuPage County communities that you've talked to, and any other local communities that have already gone through and decided to put this on a referendum for the January 3rd?
Well, North Aurora actually chose Integris, and they're on that list of towns that passed a referendum. And they got a rate, I believe, of 5.75. Don't hold me to that, but I think it's 5.75, and that's one of the lower numbers that you'll see. But in answer to your question directly, I'm not sure how many towns have decided to go forward and put this on the referendum in March. Like I said, we've given this presentation now about 12 or 13 times. We've got 3 more this week, following tonight with 3 other towns. So I think they're all kind of where you are now at this point of deciding, do we want to go forward with this, and what manner do we want to go forward with it? And so I think as of tonight, you're probably in the same boat as about 20 or 30 other towns.
The expectation is 50 or more are likely to do it.
We're probably still on the pier, not in the boat yet. We're just hearing about this for the first time tonight.
And that's a good segue, Mayor. An item such as this is a discussion item only, and per our policy, the next step would be the council to direct staff whether to do or prepare additional information for next steps. And so what I'd like to propose is, in the coming days and weeks, we'll be talking about what our work plan looks like for the next months and all next year, and we can decide how and if we would like to move forward at that time.
Right, only because we have a lot of other things on our plate. But thank you very much for coming and making the presentation. It was very informative, and I certainly know a lot more about municipal aggregation now than I did 30 minutes ago. So we very much appreciate you coming down and being as neutral as possible. That was appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, now we're back to council member reports and new business. And I think I was going to start with Commissioner Barnett, so I'll stick with that.
I have nothing else.
Commissioner Snell.
Nothing.
Commissioner Waldeck.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Rankin.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Newstead.
This weekend in beautiful downtown Downers Grove is the annual Fine Arts Festival, September 10th and 11th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. right here in downtown Downers Grove. There will be some street closures in town for that event. It's a great event, and you can see a list of all of the artists at downtowndg.org. There are, I think, over 100 different artists this weekend in town, so it's a great event. As Chief Jackson said, there will be a 9/11 memorial service at 11:50 in downtown to observe that day in our history. So hope to see everybody downtown this weekend. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner, I appreciate that. Just a few things for my part. First of all, a number of us were able to attend Midwestern University's dedication ceremony for their amazingly spectacular new science clinic. It is 239,000 square feet of just a stunning representation of state-of-the-art technology. And if that little speech I gave earlier about the high school kids I'm seeing being light years ahead of what I was back then, I got to tell you, none of the school classrooms I was ever in look anything like this. It was actually amazing. I don't think I said anything the whole time because my jaw was open. It was really quite impressive, and if anyone who wasn't able to make it, you've got to ask for a tour because it's really quite spectacular. And to know that we have that here in Downers Grove is a huge point of pride. So I want to congratulate them and appreciate the invitation. And we even had a U.S. Congressman come down. That's how impressive the facility is. Congressman Roscom was there, as well as our own the State Senator Ron Sandak. Also want to congratulate the Downers Grove Noon Lions Club on arranging for such spectacular weather for their third annual Labor of Love 5K race. I'm glad to report that there were no elected official injuries experienced during the race.
Did you finish?
I finished, and not too bad either. It was a very good event, good weather, a little cool, but that was great for running. And that's another event that takes place here in town that's run by a not-for-profit organization. It's really grown leaps and bounds from its first year. I mean, the first year there were maybe about 40 runners, and I think there were close to 300 runners, and then walkers and kids beyond that. So congratulations to them. And Commissioner Newstead already mentioned the Downtown Arts Festival, which of course will be another reason for people to come downtown. And I know Commissioner Rankin would have said that the Grove Foundation is having a golf outing this Saturday. I believe it starts at what time?
2:30.
2:30 over at the Downers Grove Public Golf Course. That's another.
No, it's not full. We still have like 20 spots.
Well, there you go. There's 20 spots. That's another good local organization and a time-honored event that if I was in town, I would participate in. But such as it is, business comes first. That's all I have. Thank you, everyone, for coming and participating. With that, I will ask for well, actually, we need to adjourn into executive session, so I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn into executive session to cover two subjects that Commissioner Schnell will tell us about in a moment.
Oh, no? Mayor Tully, I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C2 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider collective bargaining negotiating matters between the village and its employees and their representatives. I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C5 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the village or whether a particular parcel should be acquired. And lastly, I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C6 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider the setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by the village.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. We are convened into closed session. For those of you who aren't going to stick around, thank you for coming and good night.